And while doing so, even before Russia came to the table for a ceasefire negotiation, Trump unironically undermined his proxy in the negotiations like a man who has no understanding of how negotiations are supposed to take place. It blows my mind that Donald Trump, Mr. Art of the Deal himself, came...
All of you know that this week we had a real chance to take important steps toward ending this war, if only Putin had not been afraid to come to Turkey. And I was ready for a direct meeting with Putin, whether in Ankara or in Istanbul, and not just for a meeting, but to resolve all the important issues to my mind. But he didn't agree to anything, Putin. And you can also see that the Russian delegation that came to Istanbul is of a very low level. None of them are people who actually make decisions.
The first direct peace talks in 3 years between Russia and Ukraine, they wrapped up just a short time ago in Turkey. Not in attendance, Russian President Vladimir Putin or Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky or U.S. President Trump. He says he plans on meeting with Vladimir Putin soon, and that's where real progress will be made. Let's get right to the White House. CNN's Kristen Holmes is there. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Well, that's right. This week of wheeling and dealing in the Middle East is over, and now that focus is on peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. And Donald Trump himself had been floating this idea that he might go and somehow serve as mediator between Putin and Zelensky should they both decide to go. Of course, that became more evident that he was not going to be doing that, as we saw Putin backing out of these negotiations, or at least rejecting this offer to sit in on them. So there are really low expectations from the U.S. on what's going to come out of here.
I don't know why Al-Jilani was talking there.
He's holding out hope he can still have these direct
Sounds a lot like
conversations with
Zelensky.
Vladimir Putin. Take a
Didn't
listen.
know his English was so good.
I think it's time for us to just do it. I said, they all said Putin was going, and
I don't care about watching the second part of the Bernie interview. Calm down, okay?
Zelensky was going, and I said, if I don't go, I guarantee Putin's not going. And he didn't go, and I understand that.
When do you think you'll meet the president?
As soon as we can set it up.
He also said that maybe he would have a call with Putin. He spoke to reporters on the plane once they got on their way back to the U.S. He also said that he thought that they could solve it together, but maybe not, but at least then they would know. One thing that we know is happening here, particularly with the United States, is that they don't want the administration to in any way look like Vladimir Putin is taking advantage of them. They want to look strong in these negotiations, which of course is why Donald Trump appeared to have waited until it was clear Putin wasn't going to say that he also would not be attending those talks. John?
All right, Kristen Holmes, great to have you back on in the morning after a very important assignment. Thank you very much. All right, with us now, Jill Doherty, our CNN contributor and former Moscow bureau chief. And Jill, I want to read you a couple very early readouts that we just got from these fairly low-level Ukrainian-Russian meetings. First, we were told that the Ukrainians only spoke to the Russians through an interpreter, which is always interesting because Russia is widely spoken in Ukraine. And the second thing here from a Ukrainian source with knowledge of the negotiations, they said the Russia delegation did not have any mandate to make important decisions. They're not ready to decide anything meaningful to end the war. Those are the latest tidbits. What's your read on them?
I'm not surprised. Language is really a factor here because Ukrainians, yes, some of them speak Russian, but fewer and fewer are speaking Russian because they're speaking Ukrainian, which is a different, though related language. So it's a political statement to speak Ukrainian. And then the fact that they didn't get very far and that delegation from Russia wasn't that high up and couldn't make decisions, also very predictable because we know that almost deliberately they didn't send the foreign minister. They sent, these are competent people, but they are not very high up in the ranking. So but I think both of those are predictable. But then you have to go back to President Trump, who basically said, nothing much is going to happen in Istanbul until Vladimir Putin and I meet and talk.
Talk to me more about that and why that statement.
Initially, this was set up so that Trump would go to Turkey and Putin would go to Turkey and Turkey would present itself as the table and that there would be a real communique between all of the leaders involved to get serious about the ceasefire negotiations. Russia, of course, said off and no, without openly saying it, but basically saying that. And after that, Trump didn't want to go to Turkey. And then he was like, well, I'm not going. Putin is not going because he knows I wasn't going to go, even though he literally said he was going to go. He actually said he was going to an undisclosed location. And I think the reason why they revealed that he was going to an undisclosed location is because they didn't want to give the game away, whether they were going to Turkey or not. And of course, once Putin stated that he's not appearing at these meetings, then Trump said he's not going either. And then it's over at that point. There's no real ceasefire conversation.
It has implications not just on the meetings that just took place, but also on the broader situation here and how it's being viewed in Europe.
Yeah, I think it's really important. You know, right now I'm in Tallinn, Estonia, and that is one of the countries you'd have to say right on the front line.
Estonia getting a lot of play today. I will say what Vladimir Putin is doing right now is disgusting. Like it's obviously disgusting in terms of like invading Ukraine, killing Ukrainians, all this stuff, but what he is doing to Donald Trump is insane. He is literally him over in unimaginable ways, over and over and over again. Trump is so desperate to put together a ceasefire negotiation because he ran on that ceasefire negotiation and because so many people in his constituency, in his base of support, think that Ukraine represents homosexuality and the Democratic Party and yada, 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 that he literally has to put together something, anything. And Vladimir Putin recognizes that and has at first farmed Trump to just shit on Zelensky because he thought maybe if he leans into Trump in that regard and says like, oh, we want ceasefire, of course, that if Trump undermines his party in the negotiation aggressively, perhaps there will be a ceasefire negotiation. And now he's just leading him on. Trump gave Vladimir Putin everything. Trump gave Vladimir Putin everything in the ceasefire negotiations. Trump forced Zelensky to make concessions on every issue, issues that would most likely cause Zelensky to be assassinated, okay? And while doing so, even before Russia came to the table for a ceasefire negotiation, Trump unironically undermined his proxy in the negotiations like a man who has no understanding of how negotiations are supposed to take place. It blows my mind that Donald Trump, Mr. Art of the Deal himself, came to the table by shooting his own proxy in the foot before they arrived at the negotiations and then saying, I'm sorry, sir, my proxy is a pussy. He sucks. I want to farm him for all of the have. It is one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Now, is Trump wrong when he says you don't hold the cards to Zelensky? No, he's not wrong. Of course, Zelensky or Ukraine holds no fucking cards. But it's disgusting for America to say that to the Ukrainians, especially when it is America that has also used Ukraine as a proxy in the situation after they were unjustifiably fucking invaded. It is America that has consistently escalated tensions against Russia using Ukraine as a proxy historically. It is not Ukrainians that are at fault here, and yet it is the Ukrainians that are victim to these actions. You're such a liberal on Ukraine. Defend Ukraine for American interests is all you stand for. Lamafayao, Jesus Christ. No, you fucking moron. I just don't think that Russia is the based destroyer of Western liberal hegemony in the way that you approach it, because I recognize that it's a fucking a despotic kleptocracy. A despotic kleptocracy led by a fucking dude who wants to make a final impact and restore at least some semblance of the Russian Empire before he finally fucking passes away. There is also obviously some understandable security concerns that Russia has from a realpolitik perspective, perspectives that I agree with. Like I am not agree with necessarily, but like perspectives that I understand, okay? But the reality of the matter is, in terms of fucking invading Ukraine, this was an idiotic move because Russia knows that American involvement in Ukraine presents a threat, but they know America was never going to let fucking Ukraine into NATO. What are you, crazy? Come on. Come the fuck on, especially when you are directly an energy provider to all of Ukraine's other NATO nation partners that would have voted against Ukraine ever joining NATO. And look what look what happened to your energy deals now. Your fucking pipeline was blown up. I think everyone everyone with the exception of Ukrainians is behaving like shit here. Biden's goading of Vladimir Putin certainly did not help. Their refusal to recognize the tide of battle was not going to change, and that when they had the point of maximum leverage, if they truly cared about the safety and security of Ukrainians, if they wanted to avoid further bloodshed, they would have packed up with a 15-point plan in Antalya shortly after the Ukrainian forces were able to purge Russians from Kiev and push them back into eastern Ukraine before Russia was able to literally take over more and more territory in eastern Ukraine over a year-long, multiple-year-long conflict. Incoherent position. If America hadn't funded Ukraine, their defense would have collapsed years ago. Europe had neither the will nor inventory to arm them. Hungary, Germany, and Turkey were/are the definitive blocks of EU and NATO. Wait, what? It's not an incoherent position. I'm not saying that America did not have genuine interest by way of civil society organizations and NGOs and the Atlantic Council in changing Ukrainian politics. Changing Ukrainian politics in a way that actually, at a time when Ukrainians themselves were also frustrated. Frustrated partially because of nationalistic sentiment, frustrated partially because of racism, frustrated partially because of the incompetence of the Ukrainian leadership in perpetuity. Ukraine was an incredibly corrupt country, okay, and still is, obviously, but it was not exactly a beacon of Western liberal democracy before the fucking Russian invasion, okay? And those were very real, very real points of resentment and anger towards existing Ukrainian nations, which the American interest groups obviously played a big role in galvanizing, and more importantly than that, took advantage of the existing popular momentum against the Ukrainian government. Russia looked at that and considered it to be a threat to their regional security. Russia did not want a country that is directly in its fucking ass cheeks to be NATO aligned. But Russia knows, as a very powerful country, that Ukraine was never going to be allowed into NATO anyway. That's it. Russia knows Ukraine was not going to ever be allowed into fucking NATO. That is insane. So if they know that, and I know that, and France knows that, and other NATO nations that were getting energy from Russia know that they were not going to allow Ukraine into NATO, why the fuck did he invade Ukraine? Why did he invade Ukraine? In some ways, it's actually very simple. It's because he wanted it. That's it. No, it was not to liberate the beautiful Russian-speaking population of Donbass, LPR, or DPR. No, that is not the reason. Don't be fucking ridiculous, okay? Such great liberation. Such great liberation that, like, the people that would have been sympathetic to Russia in the past, like those who were living in Kharkiv, now fucking despise Russia. Incredible move. Oh, it was to kill Ukrainian Nazis. Yeah, by using Russia's own nationalist, ultra-nationalist Nazi forces. Is that what it was? Yeah. Just like Israel. Just like Israel is denazifying Gaza, right? Get the fuck out of here. It's no different in many ways when you think about Russia's ambition here, or Vladimir Putin's ambition here is not all that different from Israel's ambitions. Obviously, I'm not making this comparison because one is a genocide of a 70 in the aftermath of 77 years of brutal occupation and apartheid. This whole take is a bit of an L. Putin invaded because he trusted Western leaders to think like you and give up / negotiate quickly. No, he doesn't want to bring back the USSR. He wants to bring back the Russian Empire. It's not an appropriate analog. Putin is not a fucking socialist. Putin is a capitalist KGB asset that literally was a part of the rest of the ranks of the KGB assets that were American-backed movements that took control over all of the state's industrial enterprise and became the fucking rank of oligarchs that dominate the Russian economy, all that are all obviously operating on the whims of Vladimir Putin. The only thing that boomers like Putin actually like about the USSR is the fact that it was a dominant force. Okay, that's it. They don't actually care about like reinstating some sort of centrally command economy or anything like that, even though there are plenty of aspects, even within the oligarch structure that Vladimir Putin controls, there are plenty of aspects that are state dominated in the hands of one person, of course, not through any sort of real democracy or democratic process. Having said that, I think Vladimir Putin's ambitions for Ukraine are not necessarily, like, if I were to rank them, I would say number one is pure irredentism, pure expansionist policies, okay, ego and the spoils of war, okay. Number two would probably be security concerns in terms of like Western interference in Ukrainian affairs and what kind of security concerns it might create down the line for Russia, you know, a decade in the future. And then everything else is fucking bullshit. Like the Nazi stuff is complete bullshit. Denazification is a complete bullshit reasoning for it. Or liberating Donbass is a complete bullshit reasoning for it. And the reason why I say it's complete bullshit reasoning is because you killed so many more fucking people. You killed so many fucking people. The reason why I also don't believe, like, the reason why I say it was completely unjustifiable is especially because he knows number two is a decent fucking concern, a reasonable concern, security concerns, okay? But he also knows that there are better ways to manage said security concern. That's why I always point to China. China is the manufacturing hub of the planet, and it's always going to use that to make sure that they don't disrupt the pre-existing deals that have taken place, even though America is now trying to decouple the rest of the world from trade with China so that they can actually go to conflict with China directly. With Russia, it's energy. Russia is an energy hub for Europe and many other allies. Russia is a part of OPEC+. That is a position of profound importance and influence. Russia could have just as easily continued to use that position of profound importance to just refuse Ukraine joining fucking NATO. If you listen to Putin's critique of NATO expansion, he sounds valid. He just instrumentalizes it as a base to extend his own empire influence. Yes, that's why I think fucking invading Ukraine is ridiculous. And aside from how bloody of an affair it is because he did not have to invade Ukraine to stop Ukraine from joining NATO. Okay, that's it. Why did Russia blow up the Nord Stream pipeline then? Come on, jokes, right? I don't think anybody believes this still at this point. What is this, like a day after the Nord Stream pipeline blew up? Chatter, did you read the first news article that came out after the Nord Stream pipeline blew up and then went into a coma until... Oh, you're just kidding. Okay. If Crimea, that is 98% Russian speaking and Russian in terms of national consciousness, according to you, belongs to Russia, then why is the Donbass, that is 80% Russian speaking and Russian conscious nationally, doesn't also belong to Russia? Great question. Because Donbass is directly inside of the pre-existing Ukrainian territory, and even Russia recognized that that would have been fucking ridiculous to permanently annex, which is precisely why the Minsk agreements did not demand the permanent annexation of Donbass, LPR or DPR, but instead simply wanted them to have some semblance of autonomy. That's the reason why. Okay? That's crazy. The comparison between Crimea and LPR and DPR is fucking stupid. And even then, even like the incursion into Crimea is already unjustifiable under international human rights. Like, I get it. The reason why I put it in a separate category as opposed to the Russian barbaric maneuvers in fucking eastern Ukraine is because look at the way they overtook Crimea as opposed to the way they are still trying to permanently fucking annex a place that they have no business annexing. Yeah. Sevastopol was already inside of fucking Crimea. Bad news for Canada. 85% of us speak English. No, it's not a direct it's not a direct comparison either, because when you say like Canada has like I guess it's like if people in Michigan were watching like Canadian TV and there were differences between like there were some differences between like the ethnic identification of people, where people in like the northern border were like, well, I feel very Canadian, you know what I mean? But even then, it doesn't fucking matter. It's still not appropriate at all. Okay. So in the end, it just means to implement his wet dreams of returning the Westworld back to non-gay and family ideals and civilize us. Yeah, no, that's fucking stupid too. That's the dumbest. That argument is just for American. That argument is for Amerifats on Telegram channels that resented and hated Russia their entire lives because they were communists, only to like get flipped on Russia by reading 8 fucking Telegram memes directly beamed into their consciousness from a fucking KGB agent. Okay, that's it. That's all it took for some of these dumb Amerifats to turn on Russia and to become like the #1 dick riders of Vladimir Putin. God damn, Americans are so fucking stupid. It is actually mind-boggling how stupid some Americans are. They literally spent their entire life going, oh, Russia is fucking socialist. Russia is socialist. Post-USSR dissolution. Russia is still socialist. The socialist menace. We hate him. I hate him. I hate him. We got to nuke Moscow. Only to fucking have 3 Tucker Carlson broadcasts with like, only to read 3 different memes from a Telegram channel directly from an FSB agent, and like watching 1 Tucker Carlson video about Russia to turn into fucking Duganist for some goddamn reason. They're like, yeah, that's right. Have you noticed Vladimir Putin is actually a beacon of masculinity, whereas Zelensky is gay, a homosexual. Ukraine is trying to fight back against Russia because they're gay. They want transsexuals to dominate Ukraine. We don't want that in America. Like, how can you flip so fast? These guys are so dumb. If I do legitimately believe that if China were to use the appropriate techniques of influence peddling by using the same fucking memes and shit, by using TikTok and shit, they could convince these dumb fuck boomers to be on board with globo homo communism, dude. I swear to fucking God. You just gotta be like, you know what's gay? Private enterprise in healthcare. That's gay as fuck, actually. Yeah. You know what's gay? Not advocating for homo communism. Globo homo communism. Whoa, what? What do you mean? We must become transgenders to fight back against the woke transgenders. That's why we need globo homo communism. It's the only way to defeat woke.
With Russia. And it's a security conference, so believe me, everybody here is talking about exactly this issue. But I think, you know, if you look at these discussions, I don't really believe that Putin, even if he meets President Trump, which probably will happen, that he will necessarily change his mind, because he's not just looking at Ukraine. You know, Ukraine is a very important issue. But I think Putin's ultimate objective is what he was talking about way back at the beginning when Russia invaded Ukraine, which is a very big picture. It's not only, you know, Ukraine can never join NATO. It's that you push NATO out of Eastern Europe, push them out of this region and go back to like 1991. And that, of course, is never going to happen. But that literally is one of the demands of Vladimir Putin. So he's got a long-term objective. And I do believe that President Trump doesn't quite comprehend that demand that Putin is making. It's very big. He wants to literally define security in Europe, or lack of security, which it would be.
Yeah, and again, you are right now in a country that's on the front lines of historical and physical resistance to Russia.
Come on, bro. Estonia on the front lines of what, dude? God damn, bro. This is why those countries love NATO, by the way. Just this alone is enough, okay? You get to hear on American television that Estonia is on the front lines. They're like, yeah, Estonia mentioned. It's so funny because, like, the only reason why America would ever choose to defend Eastern Europe, which, by the way, I'm not convinced it even would, is if they, 1, thought Russia was weak enough not to be able to take Eastern Europe, and 2, and more importantly, not even two, the major reason would be to defend its power on the global stage. Because once you penetrate that veil, once you destroy the idea that like NATO is a collaborative security project, all of a sudden everything falls apart. So in order to maintain this idea, in order to maintain these weapons contracts, America has to defend these NATO countries. When in fact, if Russia was a more powerful enemy and it just rolled over Ukraine and then fucking rolled over Poland and Estonia, okay, I don't think America would actually defend any of these countries. I'm just being serious. I think the United States of America is incredibly fucking selfish, okay? Unimaginably selfish. And I know this, and I think now many liberals know this as well, because they've seen the way Donald Trump talks about Ukraine. So in that regard, if Russia actually had the smoke and the weapons and the capabilities to literally fucking roll over into Lviv all the way past Kyiv, take it over, go to Lviv, and then move directly into like fucking Poland or whatever, trust me, America, I don't think would defend these NATO nations. They just got their Estonian NATO airspace violated by a Russian Su-35 when they tried to detain a Russian Black Fleet tanker and nothing happened.
Russia. What's the view from there?
HasanAbi, I don't know. Eastern European liberals still think for the most part the USA actually cares about us, and not because they use us as a colony, but with Trump, it kind of feels like this is changing. But I don't know if for the better. Yeah. I think Eastern Europe has been plagued with a severe lack of autonomy since the inception of nation states in Eastern Europe. Okay? In the way that we understand the modern world, right? Having said that, I think the American approach of just farming out weapons contracts with assurances of security is far better in the minds of Eastern Europeans, specifically because like post-USSR, a lot of these countries already had like their fill of Russian involvement in their affairs or Soviet involvement in their affairs. And there was a lot of reactionary counter movements in these countries that also were nationalist movements, right-wing nationalist movements. So because of that reason, the American approach is much nicer, I think, from their perspective. They believe it. They believe the bullshit that America sells them. Better to be in the orbit and sphere of influence of America that's far away and doesn't care enough about you than to be in the orbit and sphere of influence of a country that's in your ass cheeks and directly intervenes in your domestic affairs in ways that you don't like.
On whether there has been a back and forth swing on how the Americans are behaving. You know, President Trump for the first time had words that were construed by some as a little bit tougher on Vladimir Putin. Even J.D. Vance did. But now President Trump is going back to saying that he wants to powwow with Putin. So is it a little bit of like a tennis match from the European perspective?
Well, I mean, it is confusing. And I think that that's probably due to both President Trump, who's been kind of back and forth, but also Vladimir Putin. You know, you kind of shake it up, get a situation, and it works for him to temporize, you know, to think, well, I can get a better deal. Let's see what happens. But I think the mood here, John, is that people obviously, since they were invaded and taken over by the Soviet Union in 1940, it's a difficult relationship with Russia. That said, if you ask what they think about President Trump, I think they're worried. They are worried that President Trump ultimately may just kind of walk away and say, look, I tried, these parties can't get it together, I'm out of here, and it's in the hands of the Europeans. So that is a concern, because even though the Europeans are rallying, and they're rallying actually quite quickly with more sanctions, giving more money. By the way, Estonia itself is going to be giving 5.4% of its GDP, which is a lot more than the United States does, to its own defense, which is for NATO. So they're very serious about it. But
well, there's nothing funnier than this woman, this American woman, sitting there and talking about how one of its colonies is paying additional penance to the American mercenary force and the American military industrial complex to the tune of 5% of its entire national GDP. Okay. It's so funny. And you ask Estonians this, they're going to be like, of course, we don't want fucking disgusting Russian orcs coming over and taking over our country. Like, this is literally a colony. This is what it is. They're saying, my lordship, we will pay you. How the fuck do you think feudal structures worked in the land of monarchs? How do you think this worked? It was exactly the same. The king has an army. Half of the army is actually the very same peasants that are working under the feudal structure. The army is comprised of the peasants, but the army also pays taxes to the king, so the king will protect them. Yeah, in the modern world, we also call this a protection racket. It's what the mafia does. A racket. An extortion racket, a protection racket. That's it. You don't want the rival gangs to come up and fuck your business up. You have to pay us money so that you can defend yourself with the weapons that we will give you. And maybe if you're good enough, we'll come in and defend you directly if the other mafia. And just like the mafia, in order to justify NATO in many of these countries, they literally did do mafia shit, for the record. I'm, of course, talking about Operation Gladio. So, yeah, wonderful stuff here.
I do think the one phrase that I did hear over and over again was Estonia was right. And Estonia meaning not only Estonia, but a lot of people in this region. Estonia was right in 2022 when they said that Vladimir Putin would invade Ukraine. And they would argue, you know, people weren't paying attention. But of course, now everybody understands that that's precisely what happened.
Yeah, this is no
Estonia
game for Estonia.
Owned Hasan.
This is no deal, per se. This is life and death. Jill Doherty, thank you for being there. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, with us now, CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. So, Kim, what does that do? There are low-level meetings happening right now in Turkey between Russia and Ukraine. But what does it do to those meetings if President Trump says, you know, the only way this is going to get done is if I meet with Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, this feels like a cakewalk where Putin keeps pulling the chairs out from underneath Ukraine, and Trump just lets them. Across Europe and in Ukraine, where I just was, they're feeling like Trump always sides with Putin.
To be fair to Trump on this, Trump has all the motion on the planet, okay, to literally do a deal with Israel. And it doesn't have to be a deal. It's just Trump has to say the words to Israel, which is stop. Instead of saying the words, am Israel high? All he needs to do is say the words, stop. Okay? Like, you know how he said, Vladimir, stop. And we all laughed at that. He could say that to Israel and Israel would stop. Part of the reason why I thought maybe there is like some chance in the incredibly hyper unlikely off chance that there could potentially be a ceasefire. The reason why I said it could potentially happen was because he has no shot at doing this with Russia. He has no control over Russia, but he has full control over Israel. So in order for him to like seemingly get a W, I thought maybe he would try to dial the fucking violence back. He didn't even take that. Okay. But with Russia, he has nothing. What's he supposed to do? Like, at the end of the day, Vladimir, stop, is basically what he can do. Now, what he could do with Russia is, instead of going to Russia, he could go to China. China has time and time again shown to be a restrained party that wants peace in Ukraine, that wants to maintain stability, that is willing and able reign in Russia. Okay? Donald Trump could go to China. But instead, Donald Trump is agitating against China. Instead of trying to get China to the table and get China to rein in its partner here. Xi wore a Z ribbon. What the fuck are you on? Oh, you know what? Fuck it. Things are good. There's no reason to fucking fix it. Russia is not a partner to China. It's their colony. No, it is a partner to China. It is not their colony. You're dumb as fuck. Genuine question, but as a European, I don't really see China as impartial or wanting stability after he went to Russia to visit the parade. What makes you think it would help? Wait, first of all, the entire planet, especially on that part of the world, celebrate Victory Day. That's not unique. Okay, it's Victory Day. When I went into France, it was Victory Day there too. Like Xi Jinping going to Russia or going to Moscow for the fucking Victory Day parade is meaningful. Yes, it's China showing support to its ally, to its partner, but it's you know, their perspective on the matter is I think their perspective on the matter is basically, and this resembles the Global South's framework as well, because you'll see some people that are like pro-Russia and then pro-Palestine, and you're like, why the fuck is this happening? Why are so many people pro-Russia and pro-Palestine? The reason for that is the same reason why China is a partner to Russia in this endeavor. Because Russia is seen as a fucking weapon to wield against Western interests. They're the only guys dumb enough to aggressively go after any sort of Western intervention and actually put the fucking manpower necessary to and expend to undermine Western interests in their backyard. That's it. Because every single one of these countries that is outside of the periphery of the West and Western powers has their own fucking Ukraine. Okay? That's it. So for them, even if they don't fuck with what Russia is doing, and not because they care about the humanity of Ukrainians, no fucking state cares about human beings, let's be real. They don't even care about their own safety and security, the safety and security of their own human beings. They care about politics. They care about distribution of assets, resources, power. And in that regard, in that respect, China's analysis on the situation is clear. They just look at Russia as dangerous enough, and literally the mad lads, they're doing it. They're like, they're basically saying like, some of y'all claim to be anti-West, but they're actually fucking doing what anti-West looks like. That's what it is. And it's totally understandable for them to take a campus position. I know someone said campus in here earlier to describe it, but it's like, yeah, no shit. That's because they are literally in the enemy camp in the eyes of the United States of America. So I guess technically, yeah, they're campus. Campus is what you say to an American who was fucking against the West unconditionally, no matter who the fucking groups that they're aligning with are. Campism is just geopolitics. No, I'm using this as a joke.
But in Ukraine, the idea is if we just keep showing up, if we show that we're the willing party here, eventually, hopefully, Trump will see that Putin is playing him and the rest.
You say fucking Victory Day parade? Are you fucking crazy? You should apologize. Wait, apologize for what? What? Explain what your position is here. Victory over Estonia and you're laughing? Okay, shut the fuck up. Apologize to who? The Nazis? Like historically the Axis? What do you think Victory Day parades are? They're the fucking it's victory over Nazi Germany and Europe. What the fuck? Oh, this person I think is Russian and literally didn't understand what I was saying. Oh my God. This person thinks I was shitting on Victory Day, not realizing that I was making fun of a chatter who was like, why did Xi go to the parade in Russia, not realizing that it was a fucking Victory Day parade. No weed, only vodka. Okay, that's how we know this person's Russian. Yeah, you misunderstood me, dumbass. I wasn't saying fuck Victory Day. What are you, insane? You think I'm a fucking Nazi? Once again, we have a situation where chatter doesn't understand what I'm saying and then makes it my fucking problem. If it's unethical for the U.S. to support Israel, why isn't it unethical for China to support Russia? Do you think China's support over first of all, Russia's not doing the same thing that Israel is doing. If it was, I was going to say they would have nuked Russia, but honestly, probably not, because Western leadership is just so insanely selfish and they probably wouldn't do shit. But secondly, America's involvement with Israel is entirely different. China did not invent Russia, okay? In the way that England, the British Empire initially, invented Israel whole cloth. You think there was indigenous nomadic tribes living there, and then fucking China came in and put these these Russians there and Russified the entirety of the USSR. The fuck are you talking about? China did invent Russia. Half of Russia looks Chinese. Okay, that's fair. Do you not think Russia is committing a genocide? I think that there are understandable investigations into genocidal intent in areas of Russian operation, like was it Bakhmut? Like insane levels of slaughter. But overall, no. Or not Bakhmut, sorry, Bucha. I apologize. You're right. Also, that's not my assessment. Yeah, there's not a single UN report nor the ICC or ICJ that shows genocide. Like, there hasn't been any investigation or trials into at least tackling it from that angle. To be fair, if there was, I would definitely read into it and try to figure out if there is veracity to the claims. So you're a genocide denier. Okay, yeah, sure. Like, I think there is a level of war that goes beyond war. That's why I say, like, what America did in the Korean War is it amounts to a genocide, certainly. And I think I think that would be considered a genocide if it wasn't America doing it, you know, and a coalition of the willing. But I wouldn't even say that about, I don't know, other wars that America is engaged in, like Vietnam and Korea would reach that level. But I don't even know if Iraq would reach that level. Like, I don't know if it would be considered, but I don't know. Maybe. All of this is certainly immoral regardless. I think Iraq probably too. It's because of the sanctions too. Like, the sanctions before America even invaded Iraq was responsible for the death of 500,000 Iraqis, you know?
Of us, and he has no intentions of engaging in real meaningful peace talks. He wants to capture Ukraine.
Why is it, if you can explain, that the idea of Trump saying that he wants to meet with Putin, why is it seen by people in Ukraine and frankly across Europe that is caving to Putin's demands?
Because in the run-up to this, remember, a number of European leaders took the long train ride into Kyiv, and together with President Zelensky, they agreed that a ceasefire would start this past week, and that Putin had to comply with it or face
genocide denier. So the killing of indigenous people would be considered a just war. Wait, what? Who are you talking about? Are you saying that I'm denying genocide? What? I'm confused.
Massive sanctions. And Trump indicated that he also agreed with that. They called him from Kyiv and he agreed to that. A day later, Putin says, well, how about talks? We should do direct talks. So that was his way of heading off the threat of sanctions from not complying with the ceasefire. And it wouldn't have worked, except Trump endorsed it and said to Zelensky by tweet, well, you better show up in Turkey. Zelensky showed up. Putin is the no-show, and somehow Putin keeps getting excused. So that's the narrative as it's seen here in Tallinn, Estonia, in the Baltics, in Kyiv. They just feel like Trump admires Putin so much that he just keeps giving him a pass.
There's something of a diplomatic...
Said, what about kill the boar? Yeah, white genocide is not real. Shut the fuck up.
Charade going on in Istanbul today. In a sense, it's all orchestrated by the Russians, who are trying to avoid any real commitment to a ceasefire, as we knew they would from last week onwards, and the international community can't really do very much about it so far.
Oh, there is a ICJ. There is a ICJ decision, Ukraine versus Russia, in 2022. Ukraine made international law a centerpiece of its war effort since Russia's full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022. It came as something as a shock. Then to see the International Court of Justice deal Ukraine's legal effort 2 blows in a pair of disappointing decisions last week. In both cases, Ukraine didn't lose entirely, but the wins were so modest that a thoughtful observer called the results a huge loss for Ukraine and a major disappointment in its lawfare efforts against Russia. First case is irrelevant because we're talking about Russia's current invasion. Second case, which garnered far more attention, was filed by Ukraine against Russia shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. There, Ukraine had employed an exceptionally clever legal maneuver. Because there is no international court with jurisdiction over the violation of the UN Charter committed by Russia when it invaded Ukraine, and no international court with jurisdiction over the crime of aggression committed by Russian leaders in Ukraine, Ukraine instead used the dispute resolution provision in the Genocide Convention to bring Russia to court. In a cunning twist, they used Russia's own disinformation against it, arguing that Russia's false claims that Ukraine was engaging in genocide against members of the Russian ethnic minority in eastern Ukraine, which it had used to justify its unlawful acts of aggression, made for a dispute under the Genocide Convention that the court should resolve. The court agreed, and in its order on provisional measures, decided that Ukraine's claims were plausible and, among other things, ordered Russia to immediately suspend the military operations that it commenced on the 24th of February in the territory of Ukraine, an order Russia had entirely and predictably ignored. Ukraine's big win on provisional measures had led to some to predict a big win for Ukraine at following stages, but in the decision last week on preliminary objections, the court failed to deliver. It decided that Ukraine's clever approach, which had won the support of 32 intervening states, was too clever by half. It upheld Russia's objection that Russia's uses of force based on allegations of genocide, even if false, fell outside of the scope of the Genocide Convention and thus outside of the court's jurisdiction. But it did not kill the case entirely. It decided that it will decide whether there is any credible evidence that Ukraine is responsible for committing genocide in violation of the Genocide Convention in Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts of Ukraine. This is something of a Pyrrhic victory for Ukraine, as it means that Ukraine's conduct, not Russia's, will be the focus of the argument on the merits. Even so, it does allow the courts to review a key justification Russia has offered for its military campaign. Russia's violations of the court's provisional measures order might also leave Ukraine with some room to maneuver. I hate slamming at Grok in the chat. We get it. Y'all are funny. Okay, let's continue.
In a way, Marco Rubio, the American Secretary of State, said about a month ago, we'll have no more negotiations about negotiations, no more talks about talks. Well, that almost certainly is what they're going to come out with today, negotiations about negotiations. It isn't taking us very far in the direction of a ceasefire. Meanwhile, the war itself keeps on moving. And so the Russians have put a great deal of effort into attacking always on the southeastern front, that big semicircle in the southeast. And in this area, they're replacing their battlefield losses now. They're bringing people in with only a month's training and throwing them straight into the front. And that whole front has been alive now for many, many months. Now, as we get into the campaign season, the Russians will push even harder. And so they're making some gains around Lyman. They're making some gains around Toretsk, but the Ukrainians are pushing back. The Ukrainians are still holding Pokrovsk, even though the Russians have tried to get all the way around it, but they still can't. And the Russians themselves still can't take Chasiv Yar, which is a really important centre for going northwards to take the whole of the Donbass. Here's the key thing. Over a year ago, in February last year, February 2024, the Russians took Avdiivka. That was a really important strategic gain for them, a really important strategic loss for the Ukrainians. Over a year later, 15 months later, they're only 30 miles further on. They still haven't taken Pokrovsk. That tells you all you really need to know about what's